Okay, let's dive right in. We're at this incredible crossroads, you know? On one hand, you've got the explosion of artificial intelligence, and on the other, you have this powerful global movement for indigenous self-determination. The new frontier, it isn't land anymore, it's data. And the question of who controls that data, that's really about who holds the power.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll talk about why data is power. Then, we'll look at the difficult history of what's known as data colonialism. After that, we'll get into the solution: indigenous data sovereignty. We'll also look at the real-world frameworks making it happen, see how indigenous nations are already leading the charge, and finally, we'll talk about the critical next step: making these rights legally enforceable.
All right, so first things first. Data is power. Let's just start with this foundational idea. In our world today, the ability for any nation to govern itself, to plan for its own future, to build a strong community, it all hinges on one critical resource: data.
And that leads us to the big question, doesn't it? As AI and big data just completely reshape our world, who is really holding the power that comes from all this information? Who's benefiting? And maybe more importantly, who's getting hurt when it's misused?
Because you see, for indigenous peoples, the answer to that question has been painfully clear for centuries. Data was never a tool for their benefit. It was a weapon of control. It was a system for assimilation, a way to extract resources and knowledge. And that history, well, it directly shapes the challenges we're facing today.
Which brings us right here to this legacy of data colonialism. And this is not ancient history, folks. The way data was collected in the past is directly fueling the biases and the inequalities that are literally being coded into our technology right now.
And what's so striking here is the pattern. It's a continuous line. It starts way back in 1876 with Canada's Indian Act, which wasn't just a law, it was a data system built to classify and control people. Fast forward to the 1960s, and those same kinds of systems were used to manage the 60s scoop, where indigenous children were systematically removed from their homes. Then in the 90s, the fight was against bioprospecting, corporations trying to patent traditional knowledge. And today, that same legacy of data, taken without consent, is being fed into the AI systems that are supposed to guide our future.
All of this created a situation called data dependency. It's this strange paradox, right? On one side, there are mountains of data about indigenous communities. But on the other, that data is almost never collected by them or for their own benefit. And what's the result? It's a system that just keeps external control in place.
And this is where the past just slams right into the present. This quote really gets to the core of the problem. An algorithm? It's just a set of rules. It has no idea about colonialism. It can't understand the trauma of residential schools. It just sees patterns in the data it's given. And that data is soaked in generations of inequality. And the real-world consequences are just devastating. When you train AI on biased data, you get biased AI. So you see justice systems predicting indigenous people will reoffend at higher rates. You see policing algorithms targeting their neighborhoods. You see child protection AIs disproportionately flagging their families for intervention. The very technology that's supposed to be objective ends up automating and amplifying the discrimination of the past.
But this is not a story about victimhood. Not at all. It's a story of incredible resistance and innovation. Indigenous peoples across the globe are responding with a really powerful solution. They're asserting indigenous data sovereignty.
So let's be really clear what this means. Indigenous data sovereignty, or IDS, it's not some technical request for access. It's a political assertion. It is the inherent right of a people to govern all information about its communities, its lands, and its resources. It's an extension of the right to govern themselves, period.
And this isn't just a concept they came up with, it's grounded in international law. Specifically, it flows from the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, often called UN-DRIP. This declaration confirms the right to self-determination, and as one source puts it, you simply can't have self-determination in the 21st century without data sovereignty.
Okay, so if data sovereignty is the what, then the big question is how. How do you actually turn this fundamental right into a practical, day-to-day reality? Well, that's where two really important indigenous-led frameworks come into play.
First up, we've got OCAP. This was actually developed in Canada way back in 1998. First Nations leaders saw this damaging pattern of researchers coming in, taking data, and leaving, often causing harm. So they created OCAP as a clear, powerful tool to take back control and set their own rules.
OCAP is an acronym for four simple but game-changing principles. Ownership. The community owns its information, together. Control. The community, and only the community, decides how that data gets managed and used. Access.
The community has the absolute right to access its own data, no matter where it's being stored. And finally, possession. This one is so crucial. It's about having the actual physical and legal control of your data. It's what makes ownership real.
Now, the second framework is CARE. The CARE principles were created more recently by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. They came about because the whole open data movement was really pushing these principles called FAIR, which stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. The problem was, FAIR was all about the data. It never asked who the data belonged to or why it was being used. CARE comes in and brilliantly fills that huge ethical gap. This chart just lays it out so clearly. Look at FAIR. Its focus is purely technical, the data object, the ones and zeros. But OCAP is about community control, the legal and physical power over that data. And CARE focuses on the whole ecosystem, oriented around people and purpose. It asks, does this benefit the collective? Does it respect our authority? They're just playing on completely different fields.
And this is where the story gets so exciting, because this isn't just about protecting against harm anymore. Armed with principles like OCAP and CARE, indigenous nations are shifting from being the subjects of data to being the architects of the future. They are the ones defining what ethical tech and ethical AI will look like as we head toward 2030. I mean, just look at these incredible examples. The Cherokee Nation has its own AI task force to make sure every new technology is grounded in Cherokee values. In British Columbia, the Heilsick Nation developed an AI called Salmon Vision that blends cutting-edge technology with traditional knowledge to manage salmon populations sustainably. And in New Zealand, the Papareo project is revitalizing the Maori language by building digital tools under a unique Kaitiakitanga or guardianship license. These aren't just projects, they are blueprints for a better future.
These examples show us exactly what's possible. But for this future to be secure for all indigenous peoples, there's one last, absolutely critical step. We have to move from having powerful principles to having legally enforceable rights. This is the main event for the next 5 years.
Just think about the difference. A principle is a recommendation. It's a nice idea, an aspirational goal. But an enforceable right, that's a legally binding obligation. It means compliance is mandatory. It's the difference between asking nicely for respect and having the legal power to demand it.
And that shift, it's already starting to happen. A massive moment came in 2021 when Canada passed the UN Declaration Act. What this law did was take UN DPRIP from being an international goal and turn it into a domestic legal obligation. The government is now legally required to implement Indigenous rights, and that explicitly includes the right to control their own data and knowledge.
And that brings us right back to where we started. This quote from a 2025 guide for Indigenous leaders just says it all. In our digital world, self-determination is impossible without data sovereignty. The two are completely, fundamentally linked. So we'll end with a question, not just for Indigenous peoples, but for all of us. The work being done here to build ethics, responsibility, and community benefit right into the code of our technology, that's a lesson for everyone. It offers a blueprint for a better way. So, what could our shared digital world look like if it wasn't just built to be fast and efficient, but was built from the ground up on a foundation of genuine care?